So our session today is We Are Family, Fact Families, and Other Strategies to Support Fact Fluency. We're going to go ahead and do our quick little disclaimer, and then we're going to get into some introductions.
So this is the legal portion. Disclaimer on the use of artificial intelligence. The content presented is the intellectual property of the South Carolina Department of Education, SCDE. By participating in this event, attendees agree they will not record, capture, or share its contents without permission. Attendees agree they will not use artificial intelligence to capture or summarize the contents of the event. The SCDE reserves the right to remove attendees using these services.
Thank you so much, Lorraine.
You're welcome.
Perfect time for introduction. So my name is Chandra Hall. I am the Elementary Math Education Associate at the State Department. Next, I have two lovely co-pilots this afternoon, and I'm so excited about that. Teamwork makes the dream work. My first colleague is Lorraine Jackman. If you want to introduce yourself.
I am the Secondary Math Associate on the standard side.
I forgot to say that standard side because we have someone from the other side with us. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Dasher, and I developed the SC Ready Math test for grades 3 through 5. So I'm on the assessment side at the department.
Yes. Perfect. You get the best of both worlds today. So we are going to actually, when we think about secondary too, we have elementary, we have secondary represented, and then we also have standard side and assessment represented. So lovely. So we're going to start off with a quick check-in. It says who do we have in the room, but I don't really need to know that unless you just feel like sharing. But I would like to know, how do you feel about teaching math facts? So I would like for you to respond in the chat with either a 1, 2, or 3. Which one do you feel most represents you?
Okay, so far I see a lot of 2s coming in and a few 1s sprinkled in.
We're trying. I like it. You have to try. So hopefully we can give you some strategies today that will help you in your journey with teaching math facts to your kids. So our learning goals for today. 1, I can define fact fluency and identify the key stages of student mastery. And our second goal for today is to be able to explore strategies and assessment methods for effectively teaching basic math facts. Quick little rationale for why we are doing this. Let's throw it to Laura.
I'll take it away real quick. So we'll just start by connecting to data. Of course, making our instructional decisions based on data is always something to strive for. Many of the strategies that we'll mention today fall into formative assessment, but developing fact fluency could also support students in grades 3 through 5 on their summative assessment, which we know as SC Ready. This was evident during our 2025 Data Review Committee that we held during June 2025. What is the Data Review Committee? Teachers are selected to participate in a committee where they review test questions, or what we call test items, from the SC Ready test. Teachers get to see how well students perform on the test items and discuss ways students could be more successful on future tests. So from there, all those discussions we have during the committee are recorded and combined to create the data review report. These reports come out every year for every tested subject. And in the 2025 report, there was much discussion on making connections to multiplication and division throughout the school year. So not just teaching your multiplication unit in isolation. And then our hope is that from this presentation, you can see developing fact fluency is an ongoing effort that we should be developed throughout the school year. So although not a guarantee, but might just help your students be more prepared on their summative assessments.
Thank you so much. All right, so let's get into our agenda for today. First, we're going to look at defining fact fluency. Then we're going to look at how fact fluency is developed. And finally, we will end with looking at how we can assess fact fluency. But before we do all that, let's define it for ourselves. What comes to mind when you hear the word fluency? Think about it for a moment and then respond in the chat, please. What comes to mind when you hear the word fluency?
Okay, fast and accurate. A lot of people are doing it quickly and doing it quickly.
Okay.
Automaticity.
I see flexibility. Flexible and fluid. Accuracy, efficiency, automaticity, knowing something quickly and accurately. Second nature, systematic. Okay. Let's see. Quick, flexible, easily known. All right. Okay, so it seems like we have some consensus in the comments. So let's see if that lines up with how it is defined in our math standards. So what is fact fluency? Fluency can be described as knowing how a number can be composed and decomposed to solve problems accurately, efficiently, and flexibly. So a lot of those verbs, a lot of those adjectives that we saw in the chat align right along with how we define fact fluency at the state level. Okay. Keep in mind that fast and fluent are not the same thing. Okay, a lot of times that is a misconception that it always has to be quick, 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 but being fluent entails so many other things than just being quick. Okay, we want them to be accurate, we want them to be efficient, but we also want them to be flexible. Okay. So I have two images on the screen for you. What was done, they took pictures of students' brains while solving math problems that involved basic facts. Okay, so we see on one side it's without fact fluency, and then their brain activity on the other side with fact fluency. What do you notice? If you could respond in the chat, or you can unmute as well. What do you notice about the two images?
So we have more activity without fact fluency, takes up less brain power. With fact fluency, they weren't having to use their brain as much.
Okay. Nice. All right. So see how much more thinking they're having to do when they don't know their basic facts. This brain power that's going to figuring out their just their basic facts is interfering with the brain power that could be being used to actually focus on what the content is for that particular day. So it's very important that we get our students to a place where they are fluent with their basic math facts so that we can truly focus on what our standard is, what our indicator wants the students to know. Okay. So this is a list of our indicators and just where fact fluency comes in. As you see, they start as early as kindergarten and go all the way up through fifth grade. Even though fifth grade does not have specific basic math facts, we know that in fifth grade, they are having to apply those math facts to other areas, okay? And then also noting that in second grade is where we're making that transition from repeated addition and additive thinking to multiplicative thinking when we're moving on to multiplication. So with fluency, we have 3 phases, and we are going to discuss each one in more detail coming up. But phase 1, we have the modeling and or counting phase. In phase 2, we have derived strategies and calculation. And in phase 3, we have mastery, okay? Typically, we find students get stuck with between 1 and 2, but we want to make sure that we can get our students to phase 3. So our first phase is modeling and or counting. So here students are using object counting or verbally counting to determine the answer to their basic math facts. So they're using strategies such as counting on or counting all, skip counting, they're counting out loud or they're counting on their fingers. They might need to draw pictures, use manipulatives, or use models to help them solve problems. Things that we can do at this phase to help support our students are activities such as pull, build, and draw, where the students are given a flashcard and they're having to represent that on the sheet that you give them. So for instance, this one, if I'm working on 5 plus 3, that's the card I pull. I'm going to shade in 5 in one color and then 3 more in another color to answer my question. You can also do this with multiplication, where they are drawing groups. This one is showing 3 times 6, 3 groups with 6 items in each. Subitizing cards are also very helpful for students when they're trying to generate a picture in their head that's going to help them solve that basic math fact. And they come in all different types. We see here they have little hands, they have the dots, they have the dominoes, we see tally marks, we see 10 frames, so exposing them to all of those visuals. We can also use subitizing cards when it comes to multiplication. Here you can see that we have 7 groups of 6 shown here. And this also helps with decomposing that number because then I can talk about where I see 5 groups of 6. And a lot of times students are more familiar with their 5s. And then they can do the other 2 groups of 6 and add those together to help support them. So this phase is really about giving students a visual to draw from. You can also use the Frayer model, which we see here, where you have your basic math fact in the middle, and they're having to represent it in several ways. And that can include arrays, a set model, area models, number lines, word problems, etc. Please note that, especially when we're talking about multiplication, all models are not created equally. Initially, it's okay for them to do what you see under the pull, build, and draw, where they're drawing the groups. But eventually, we want to get them to more efficient models, such as you see below with the array. This helps when they're moving towards using array models and area models when it comes to multiplication in higher grade levels and with larger numbers. This pushes them towards more of a multiplicative thought process rather than an additive, which you will see with the original one with the groups, because they're just adding over and over again. Phase 2, derived strategies and calculations. Here we are getting students to use reasoning strategies based on the facts that they already know. So you kind of saw that with the previous example where we were using the 10 frame with the multiplication problem. They're using the 5s that they already know and the 2s that they already know to apply that to 7s, which they may not know as easily. So this looks like using 7 plus 7 and adding 1 to solve 7 plus 8. Using fact families, knowing that 8 times 5 equals 40 because 5 times 8 equals 40. Solving 6 times 4 by adding one more group of 4 to 5 times 4. So using what they already know to help them with things to solve problems that they do not know yet. Some resources that are really helpful with this are math flips. They focus on trying to find the relationship between the two sides. They have two different representations on each side, but they want them to they want students to focus in on what the two sides have in common. What is the connection between the two sides? It's not just your typical flashcard. And so here's an example. On side A, we have 5 groups of 5. And then on the other side, I don't know why it didn't show. It might have 6 groups of 5. So they're using what they know on one side to help them with another one. Another resource that can help build reasoning strategies are fact family triangles. And so you can see an example of that here below. Number bonds, also part whole models are also very helpful representations for students when they're working on reasoning strategies and based on facts that they already know. Finally, phase 3, which is our automaticity phase, knowing how a number can be composed and decomposed to solve problems accurately, efficiently, and flexibly. So at this phase, students are quick and they're accurate in their recall. They're choosing efficient strategies based on the problem. They're flexible with their numbers and strategies. They're able to explain their thinking, and they are confident about the math that they are doing. So how can we develop fact fluency in students? Well, let's get into that. So when we're talking about addition, we typically want to start with +1, +2, +0, so that we can cover those small little incremental increases. The additive property of 0, we know this, and then from there, adding 10. We can go over doubles with students, talking about tens partners, as well as the commutative property. All of these are foundational things we want our students to know so that those can be applied while they're building on to the other facts. So for instance, if I'm solving 8 plus 7, what foundational facts might be helpful in solving 8 plus 7? Feel free to unmute, or you can type in the chat. Ooh, that was quick, Megan. All right, I see doubles +1. Okay, so my near doubles, I'm thinking 7 plus 7 equals 14. So if I add one more, it's going to give me 15. I could also do 8 plus 8 if I wanted to give me 16 and then take away 1 to get 15. I could also use a strategy of making or bridging 10. So I know that 8 and 2 go together to make 10. So I'm going to add 8 plus 2. And then the remainder of what would be left from that 7 would be 5. So I would add that up. So what knowledge did I have to use in order to use that making or bridging 10 strategy? And again, you can unmute or you can type in the chat. Yes, I see it. Friends of 10, that's cute. Friends of 10, 10's partners, yes.
Decomposing 7.
Ooh, yes. Definitely have to know that. And then another strategy that builds on to foundational facts is pretending a 10. So I'm pretending in this case that 8 is a 10. In order to do that, I have to add 2 to it. So I'm going to do 10 plus 7, which would give me 17. And because I had to add 2 to make that 8, 10, I have to take those 2, the 2 away. So 17 minus that 2 would give me 15. Okay. So what foundational facts are helpful there when I'm using the pretending a 10 strategy? How to subtract. What from that foundation side would be helpful? Okay, I see 10s, adding a 10, yes. Anything else? Friends of 10 again. All right, good. So those are just some strategies that that students can utilize that build on their foundational facts. Yes, we see +2 in there too. Thank y'all. So when we're going over our basic math facts, we want to make sure that we're also focusing in on the inverse operation. So in this case, we're talking about subtraction. So there are several things we can put in place to help us with teaching our subtraction facts. Story or word problems with our part whole, take away and compare situations are very helpful. Composing and decomposing numbers and structures such as part whole, number bonds, using dominoes and math balances. I don't know if you've ever used a math balance. If you have, send me a reaction, a thumbs up, a clap if you've used math balances. They're really neat. My kids always liked using those. All right, somebody said thank you. There we go. We have some people. So those are really fun to use for the kids. Using triangle fact cards, fact families. Splat is also a really fun game that kids can play that kind of gets them thinking about decomposing numbers. If you have not heard of that, you will. I can give you that resource. I can't remember if we have that in our assessment, in our on-demand time. But if not, I will show that to you. Math tools and models, CRA model, concrete, representational, and abstract. Number paths, number lines, and quick images are all very helpful tools when we're trying to make those connections between addition and subtraction. So using these models can help make that easy for students to see. Okay, moving along to multiplication strategies. So for our foundational facts, when it comes to multiplication, those are our 2s, our 5s, our 10s, our 1s, and our 0s. Those are the facts that students typically tend to get the easiest. You could also expose your students to square numbers, kind of like with addition where we focused on doubles facts. It's kind of that same thought process. With that foundation, they can build on using strategies such as adding a group with my 2, 5s, and 10s. So if I know my 2s, then I can add one more group to figure out my 3s. And with my 5s, I can add one more group to figure out my 6s. Subtracting a group. for 9s and 4s? What facts are helpful if I'm subtracting a group to figure out 9s and 4s?
9 times 5.
9 times 5, okay. My 10s and my 5s, if I know my 10s, then I could take away a group to figure out my 9s. If I know my 5s, I can take away a group to figure out my 4s. Okay. Just a strategy to build onto what they already know. Doubling 4s, 6s, and 8s. What would I double to get my 4s? Which facts? Right. So I could double my 2s to get my 4s. I can double my 4s again to get my 8s. If they know their 3s, and they can double their 3s to get their 6s. Okay, so just building on what they already know. I can also decompose and break apart when I'm trying to figure out my 3s, my 4s, my 6s, my 7s, my 8s, and my 9s. We saw an example with the 7s earlier with the 10 frame cards, where we had the groups of 6 in the 10 frames, and it was 7 of them. So breaking that apart into 5 groups and then 2 more groups, that is an example of that. So again, building on from the foundational facts, the 2s, the 5s, the 10s, the 1s, and the 0s that we already know. And if you have students that are where the square numbers are easy for them to do, using near squares might be a tool that's helpful for them in accessing some of those facts that may not be as familiar. All right. And as stated earlier, when making connections to the inverse operation, we can use story or word problems, equal groups, compare, quotative and partitive word problem situations. We see a lot of that with the different types of word problem structures in early childhood. I feel like with the 3rd through 5th grade, sometimes we get away from those a little bit, but you want to make sure that you are exposing your students to all of the types of word problem structures so that they are familiar with it. Again, related facts through triangle fact cards and focusing on fact families, as well as math tools and models, again, emphasizing the CRA model, concrete, moving to the representation or pictorial, and then finally to the abstract. One note, it does not have to go in that order. Sometimes your students already know the abstract and they need to go back to the concrete so that they can explain themselves. I just want to throw that in there, that it's not always a linear progression when it comes to CRA. Also, the use of number lines, set and area models, tape diagrams, number bonds, grid paper as you see below. In the orange and yellow and the green underneath it. And then visual supports, of course, well, here you can see those math flips again, and there you can see the other side because we only saw A the first time, but you can see B here. So they had 5 groups of 5 there, and then they're trying to figure out what 4 groups of 5 is based on the other side and explaining that relationship between them. So if we are focusing on how the two relate, if we're focusing on how we can decompose numbers, that is really going to help support students when it comes to subtraction because they already know those relationships. They've worked on the decomposing and the composing of those numbers. Okay. So for this next part, I'm going to get a little bit of interaction from you all. So, can you relate? Take a moment to reflect on how you learned and developed your basic facts. What strategies were used? If you hear or see something on the next slide that reminds you of your journey, feel free to let us know by giving a thumbs up emoji when we get to it. And if you are not familiar with how to do that, if you look at the top of your screen, you should see a bar that looks similar to this. It may be black. And then you should see a button that has react or that says react. If you click on that, then you should see the little thumbs up emoji. Okay? So let's get into this. Yeah, somebody found it. All right, so building students' math fluency. All right. So memorization, is this something? Yeah, I see a lot of thumbs up. Me too. I experienced that. You just had to memorize the facts and then you even had to recite them in front of everybody when I was in school. I hated that. We want to focus more on building number sense rather than memorization here. I had time tests and had to just memorize the facts. Me too. We had time tests too, and there was this one kid that always beat us every single time. We were so happy when he was absent because then that gave somebody else a chance. All right, only solving equations. We want to move away from equations in isolation to providing students with concrete experience with numbers and values. Hands-on manipulatives, that's CRA. 100 problem worksheets. Anybody had these? Yeah, that's the cause of a lot of people's math anxiety now. All right. So we want to move away from the kill and drill and get our kids playing games instead to engage with these basic math facts. And in a little while, you will see how we can use some of these time tests in a better way. Time tests. Yes, yes, so many of us saw this. All right. So we want to use them for formative assessments. They can be helpful. They can be used in a helpful way, let me say. So hopefully you will get to explore how we can use those in a different way that hopefully does not cause anxiety for our students. Singing songs and skip counting. Yes. Schoolhouse Rock, along those lines. We want to focus on building number sense and not just cutesy little games or songs that have them memorize things. Traditional flashcards. Anybody? Yeah, I see a lot of thumbs up here too. It's important, rather than just having the traditional flashcards, we want to make them interactive. We want to provide visuals. Math flips are an example of that. Teacher describing strategies to students. Did anyone experience that? I don't even know if we got to that point of my teacher describing strategies, but we don't want to give them the strategies necessarily. We want them to discover those. So just telling your students everything rather than having them discover is not always the best route. There are some things where we do have to do that, but if we don't have to do that, then let's let them figure it out. Using tricks. Instead of using tricks, we want them to use number relationships, okay? I know we've probably all seen the little 9 trick where if you're doing 9 times 4, you put down the 4th finger and then how many fingers you have to the left are your 10s and how many are to your right. Yes, yeah. All right, learning facts in numerical order. Not always the best route. Yes, we've seen this. So we want to present them in a way that they can build on what they know to help them with facts that they don't know. So strategy-based activities. Public displays of goals, wins or losses. Yeah. My teacher had a little vine, and then we all had little monkeys with our names on it, and you had to stand up and go through all of your twos facts. And if you got them, then your monkey got to move, but if you didn't, it still had to stay in the same place. I know. I know. It was bad. But when we know better, we do better. And we are definitely going to do better. So personal progress journals are a helpful way to still see the progress that students are making, but not necessarily publicizing that to everybody. Okay. My monkey would have stayed in one place for a very long time. I think that's a lot of us. All right. I see a hand raised. I'm sorry. Let's see. Paula, do you have a question? Okay.
It's possible that it wasn't. Yes, that's what I thought. You're gonna have
Okay.
to undo it.
She said, oops,
I
no.
got
No need to panic.
you.
All right, so I'm going to give you a moment to read this quote, and I would like for you to let me know, how does this resonate with you?
Um,
Can we see the quote?
okay.
Yes. Let me know if you can't see it. Giving you some
Paula
think
can't see it.
time. Giving you some think time, and whenever you're ready, if you like to unmute and share, or if you'd like to type it in the chat, how does this quote resonate with you?
For me, it means that math is living. It's something you can play with. And it leads to, like, when you get older, understanding that there are multiple ways to solve a problem. So it's not just memorization. To me means there's a fact, there's one way to do this, there's one answer. Where in fact with math, there's so many different ways to arrive to that answer. And that's kind of where we want to lead our kids to.
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree with that. I think a lot of us experience a mathematic education where they focus on just one way to do it. You copy what the teacher had, what the teacher did. You probably didn't understand why she did it. But if you were able to copy what she did, then you got a good grade. And you thought that that was the only way to do it. And that's not what we want to have our students leaving with. We don't want them to think there's only one way to do something.
I agree wholeheartedly. To build on, I didn't see who was speaking previously, but to build on the statement previously, just to give it some real world context, these strategies help students understand why they're doing. And once it clicks in their head, it becomes that second nature, that automaticity that we were speaking of, that second nature, if you will. We had an aha moment today when I was in a classroom and the teacher was teaching Eureka Math lesson 18. And it was the subtraction by decomposition. But she did a review first and did subtraction by regrouping. And then she did subtraction by the number line and applied that same problem to subtraction by decomposition to show why it's important to have different viewpoints of how to achieve the same answer.
Yeah.
So I couldn't agree more with the previous speaker, but you can only get that if fluency is in place.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing.
We have a
Are there
few
anything in
comments
the
in the
chat?
chat.
Yeah.
Yes. Definitely because, and then it moved. Developing number sense deepens understanding and learning. I tell my students often, there's more than one way to skin a cat, courtesy of my Nana back when I was little. LOL.
Yes, Nana.
Especially when students see a question that is presented. Oh, sorry, that was Paula. And this is Brittany. Especially when students see a question that is presented with different wording and now they don't know how to answer when it seemed like they understood when memorizing. So that shows how much number sense is essential.
Love it. I love how Tammy says the same strategies also work with larger or smaller numbers like fractions and decimals. Making a 10 becomes making a whole. Yes, very good points. So being able to apply that to new math, how powerful is that? All right. So now I'm going to give you some time to go into some different ways that we can assess fact fluency. And we're going to do that through some on-demand time. So one of my two lovely co-pilots is going to place this link in the chat for you. Thank you, Lorraine. She was on it.
You're welcome.
So if you could go ahead and access that website, you should find a slide that looks similar to this. There will be six different categories that you can choose from. You can decide that you want it to explore observation logs more. You can do journal prompts, strategy quizzes, self-assessment and monitoring, repurpose time tests that I kind of hinted at earlier, or math running records, or you can do a combination. You will have 10 minutes to explore the different assessment options. And at the end of that 10 minutes, we are going to reflect in one of the following ways. What's in the cards for today? You will either type in the chat what idea you loved, which strategy are you excited to use right away? That is our hearts. You could choose a diamond, gems that last forever. What gem of wisdom reinforced something that you already knew? You might choose to do clubs, something that grew. What new ideas, new thoughts, or a new point of view did you get today? Or you can choose spades, something that you dug into. What did you start working on today? How is it coming along? And that may be something that you're thinking about more so when you leave, when this session is done. What are some things that you plan to implement? Okay, so you should have already accessed the website. Again, the link is in the chat. I will give you 10 minutes to explore, and then we will come back together and I will have some people either share out, unmute and share, or you can just type in the chat. Again, choosing what's in the cards for you today, either the hearts, diamonds, clubs, or spades. All right. Well, you will have access to that for as long as you need access to it. We are not taking it down. So you might decide to implement one thing for the first 9 weeks and then maybe add on something else. Those resources are there for you to look at whenever you are ready. So just hold on to that website. So let's revisit those learning goals. Were we able to define fact fluency and identify the stages of student mastery? Me a thumbs up if we were able to get that done today. There we go. I see some thumbs. And exploring strategies and assessment methods for effectively teaching basic math facts. And I see some more thumbs up there. Thank you so much. So many resources that you can turn to for developing fact fluency. These are just a few, and that's 2 slides worth of them. I also included the book covers there in case that is helpful for you.